One.
Hello, welcome back to Latino Paradox. My name's Arnold Torres. With me is the distinguished syndicated writer, Ruben Navarrette. Ruben and I spent a lot of time on the phone talking about issues. We came up with Latino Paradox, huge population of Latinos, all this political power, but yet our socioeconomic profile remains the same. Big topic, deals with economics. In elections, LA Unified School District. For the very first time, you now have a majority of members on the school board that are pro-charter school, pro-choice. Ruben, you pay a lot of attention to education. You recognize it's one of the top priorities, has always been for the Latino community. How do you see this happening, and how do you see this moving forward for Latinos?
So, my friend, you've said long ago, correctly observed, that my brain works in threes, and it's true. I have these three thoughts. I think
right.
Education is the number one issue for Latinos, for sure. The polls show that. Latinos, even when they're running for president, voting for president, they think they're voting for the national superintendent of schools. The education is always the number one priority for electing a president and everybody down ballot. Number one. It's also the number one issue for Latinos as a civil rights issue. It is, in fact, the new civil rights issue. I think smart people are saying that. I've noticed that for some time. There's no issue you can think of in terms of access that's more important than education in terms of a civil rights issue and the power to improve Latinos' lives. Lastly, it's the number one issue, example of a case of conflicting interests. Where you have moneyed interests on the part of often the school boards, the teachers' unions that fight accountability efforts that are supported by Latinos. A clear difference of opinion there, a clear contrast of interest. And in this case, as you mentioned, the charter school movement looms large over all three of these components. Because in this particular race now, people are going to be watching very closely these two people who were elected, supporters of charter schools, in what seems to be a clear renunciation, a clear renouncing of the way it's always been done and the status quo. If that's what voters in that district wanted, was a status quo, those mostly Latino voters, they would have voted for the other candidates. They clearly want change.
Well, I really wonder, Ruben, because I really wonder how much of the education, the polls tell us that it is a big issue for us, but we as a community have not been big players in this. LA is one huge exception to virtually every rule. Unions have always had a phenomenal influence in our community on virtually any public election. Education boards has really not been much of an exception to that rule up to now. LA broke that. But the million-dollar question is, how much were Latinos involved in breaking that connection? These two districts were not necessarily huge Latino districts. They certainly have, every district has Latinos in them. But they weren't in the southeast. They were in the valley. So the million-dollar question will be, in my opinion, okay, you have a school teacher and you have both of them are school teachers that used to be in the system, but both of them are non-Latino. So the million-dollar question is, be careful what you wish for. What are the charter schools going to be doing that's different? Okay? Because
let's find out.
The unions are not going to change their disposition.
Let's find out. A lot of parents are saying, I think, let's find out. They have experienced to the hilt what the public schools offer them now. They understand that. The status quo, Latinos have not had a good time in the public school system. They show up in disciplinary courses more often. They're disciplined at a higher rate, their students. They're tracked out of certain courses. The dropout rate has remained high. You have famous examples of Latino parents trying to get their kids out of bilingual education and being told by other Latinos who run the districts, you're ignorant, you don't know what the research says, get out of here. Bad customer service.
Yeah, but Ruben, you have to be...
So I think people are willing to try something new.
But you have to be careful about this. Charter schools have their own problems. They're not inclusive of minorities. They tell you that they are, but they really aren't. They're not. We're not at the table unless we're there. In all honesty, as window dressing or as somebody's best friend. You have a real play between Latinos versus blacks in the charter school movement. You have the charter school people who are from back east They play heavy to the black community. You have some that play heavy to the Latino community,
right.
And every now and then you'll have some that kind of come to the table, and you'll see black and brown at
right.
the table.
Right.
But the reality is that these people are as guilty as public schools. The only difference is that we're back to the political description, right? Republicans are so bad, they'll always make the Democrat look good. Public schools have historically been so bad.
Right.
The one institution that practiced institutional racism against us as Latinos and against blacks,
right.
Okay, they're so bad, the charter schools can be just a little bit better, and they can say, hey, man, we're better than the other guys.
Right.
I'm not.
But it doesn't give the public schools much of a leg to stand on to say, hey, you want to stay away from those candidates and those charter schools because that's really rolling the dice. You don't know how bad it can be. Because they have no currency, they have no street cred, they have no money in the bank with our community.
That's right.
And they've had ample opportunity to build that up by treating our kids with more respect. The big dangers in the public schools, as someone who taught in the public schools, the big dangers there are low expectations, the sense that the school operates for the convenience of the adults who work there, not the kids who learn there. That's all it right there. You know, when they negotiate with their contracts and they want to teach fewer days, they don't really care how many days the kids are learning in China or Japan. They care about their own teaching days and their own vacation days so they can spend the time with their families.
I think that point's excellent, because one of the big issues in this election that people didn't want to talk about, but it was absolutely constantly there, is 800-pound gorilla, is contract is up for the teachers. So teachers, the unions from all over the country put money into this campaign.
That's all they care about.
It's going to be about money.
It's all about money for them. Absolutely. And so here's the thing. Rather than get bogged down to a discussion, debate over charter schools versus the public schools, I think there ought to be room for both. It's interesting to me that this used to be a discussion between the public schools and the vouchers, private schools, and charter schools, which came up in Florida and Arizona 15, 20 years ago. You know, I lived in Phoenix 20 years ago. They were having the beginnings of the charter school movement. I recently found out that this is the 25th anniversary of charter schools, and the first charter school was started in St. Paul, Minnesota, 25 years ago. And so at that time, that was considered kind of a step up from the voucher movement, and it wasn't as bad as the vouchers, not as bad as the private schools, because after all, they operated with public money, okay? And then you could create your own charter, and there were Latino charters and African-American charter schools and all the like. But now, you know, the status quo doesn't work that way. The status quo, once it defeats the vouchers, it goes after the charter schools. It's like McDonald's. Once it gobbles up Burger King, it wants to go after Wendy's too. It only wants to be the one. It has to be the one. It needs a monopoly. The definition of monopoly is no other choices. Okay? And I bought it 25 years ago when they said to me, if you support us getting rid of private school vouchers, and we'll support charter schools as a nice alternative. Well, now 25 years later, they changed the rules, and now they want to destroy charter schools too. Why? Because McDonald's wants to be the only place you can buy a hamburger. The monopoly. And that's what public schools want, is a monopoly over our community.
Yeah. Now, as our paradox, we always ask three questions. All right? So, who are we in this case, Ruben? Who are we in this fight with LAUSD?
We are.
And what do we want, and what are we doing wrong?
Exactly. Well, here they are quickly. Who we are is a community that always values education, puts it a top premium on it. You know, we go to work all day and still find time to go with our kids to meet with the teachers if need be. But at the same time, we have tremendous respect for teachers. Maestro, we have a lot of respect for our teachers. That does not serve you well in the public school system. Because in the public school system, they react best. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. You have to be able to complain and protest and challenge. And we do not do that well when it comes to challenging the educational system. So that's who we are. What we're doing wrong, or first of all, secondly, what we want is we want our kids to have a full education. Full access to education. We want to know how they're doing. You know, we want to know how they're testing. We want to know how they're going up against other students and how they're doing compared to other districts. And lastly, what are we doing wrong? We have not held our schools to the same level of account that we hold ourselves to and our students to. You know, say this about Latino parents. They're pretty hard on their kids. The kid's not going to be able to come home and say, you know what, I dropped out of school. You know, the parent's going to come down on the kid pretty hard for that. But we need to be just as hard on our institutions as we are on our family members and ourselves, and demand just as much from our institutions, like the public schools, as we do from our family members and ourselves.
I'll agree with the first two, who we are and who we want. I think you're absolutely right. I think where we're going wrong is this, Ruben. You're right about accountability, but we're allowing people in this state, like Ricardo Lara, who comes from LA, like several other Latino members who are at the state legislature, to constantly support the public school system because of the money that they bring into their campaigns. And these guys are the ones who are out there saying, we love Latinos, immigrants, we're protecting you, we want Medi-Cal for you, we want this, we want that. It's all the low-hanging fruit. Where are the Latino Democrats when it comes to these kinds of races? I'll tell you where they are. They're exactly where the Republicans are, not wanting to speak about Trump. And that's where the Latino Democrats are when it comes to these kinds of races. So yes, accountability is important. I just hope that our community can stand up much more as they have around immigration and really make education, what you've said, the number one priority in our community, because it damn well is. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you'll like this version of Latino Paradox. Until next time, thank you very much.